world has gone AI crazy, or so it might seem. But does that spell the end of intelligent automation, or is this a case of emperor's new clothes? Well, today, Paula Carneiro Cox, head of marketing and business development at WonderBotz, will help us find out. Paula, welcome to DRUID Talks.
Hey, Kieran, I'm so excited to be on yet another platform with you and talking about our same favorite subject is how do we make better business outcomes using technology? And yes, you're right. There's a new flavor of the year and it's AI. So looking forward to our discussion.
Well, Paula, for those who have been living under a rock and don't know who you are, can you tell me a little bit more about your background and your role at WonderBotz? Set the scene.
Of course, that's so sweet. Assuming that I'm micro famous, right, in our space. No, so sweet of you. So I'm responsible for business development and marketing, and the reason that I've sort of stepped into that is I've been telling stories about how organizations are operationalizing technology for a long time. And so at WonderBotz, what I'm able to do is translate all of the shiny bells and whistles that keep coming on the scenes with the advent of Chat GPT. Before that, it was RPA. We had a little dabbling in OCR and IDP. And if you heard all those acronyms, you know it's alphabet soup. And I've been doing the ABCs of intelligent automation since the beginning of this portion of my career. My background being in process improvement was a natural segue, right? Because as we see, automations are typically wireframes and they used to be Visio diagrams. So it's just an easy translation and a transition from what I was doing in my past life. So today I spend a lot of time with universities. I spend a lot of time with up and coming, superstars in the AI and automation space and help them see that this is a true career path. It's not just a hobby. And as we see more and more organizations adopt automation and the AI infusion that comes with that now, we're seeing more and more of a workforce shift that I'm excited to be a part of.
Well, by the sounds of things, no better person to answer all of the questions that I have got today. So the first one, Paula, is generative AI, is it just intelligent automation with a new code, or is it something different?
So I like to think of intelligent automation as a broad umbrella. It's almost like a catch-all box, if you will, and there's a whole bunch of different tools in that toolbox, right? So generative AI, it has taken kind of a front and center seat. And I think the excitement is because for the first time, we're actually looking into the world of a developer. Because what generative AI has done is it's given us, those of us who are business people, not technically savvy, right? It gives us a little bit of insight into the business processes that these developers have to understand to effectively turn out automations. And so what generative AI has done is it's given us sort of a lens, and we've seen, okay, if we can ultimately train and teach code and build code and create code that then builds itself and creates itself and can sort of begin to generate more, faster, quicker, better, with no mistakes, then we're going to have just kind of compounding results on how quickly we can get these automations deployed. So what I love about Gen AI, I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be around forever. It'll probably take its hype cycle as far as a term. I think it's going to be woven into the fabric of what we do in intelligent automation. It'll sort of be just kind of like coding, like it's there and it happens, but the intricacies of it don't resonate as much. It's not really what the CFO talks about when he's chewing on what automation organization he's going to choose as a vendor, right? What it's also been able to do is make it easy for business users to digest, because what it's done is it's said, okay, you don't necessarily need two different types of users on what we call traditional RPA, where you'd have to have sort of a subject matter expert. You'd have to have a little bit of, business analysis. You'd have to have the technical acumen to understand the design, to understand how the infrastructure would be set up. Should you scale? Should you add other technologies? And this is sort of like the machine kind of giving you a head start, right? Is sort of my layman's term translation of it. So it just makes it a lot easier for business users and technologists alike to have a serious and well thought out conversation about the effort. because you can suddenly measure the effort in a very meaningful way, and begin to really project the sequencing of your programs, launch projects a little bit more seamlessly, and then have a head start on what makes sense to do next. Which I think is everybody's great blunder in the last 10-15 years in intelligent automation is what's next after the low-hanging fruit. And generative AI really kind of gives you a head start in that.
I kind of adore that, because that has always been the problem, isn't it? The number of people that you need involved, the complexity and everything else. And I kind of love great technology that doesn't diminish for the fact that you need to do all that, but it actually co-pilots and supports you to do the things that you really want to do.
Exactly.
So I suppose that lends the next question. So why is RPA and intelligent more relevant than ever, or is it?
Interesting. So my answer is naturally going to be a little biased because I'm in the space, right? I think it's more relevant than ever, as a final answer. What I don't think is what I used to say in the past, that every business leader needs to understand it, know it, own it, adopt it. I don't think that anymore. More and more what we're seeing is that just like we had business process reengineering and outsourcing perhaps accounts payable, that's very relatable, right, for most business leaders. And we had this big wave of offshore and outsourcing, right? And then we had this big wave that came back of nearshore. Intelligent automation is business critical. Every organization needs to have some element of this because it's very nimble design. The problem with hard coding and what you see of organizations that say, oh, well, we have a homegrown system. There's nothing wrong with the homegrown system until you need to API it into something that's modern, right? And so I think it's going to be the foundational component. I think it is business critical. What I don't think is that we don't need to continue translating it for the C-suite. The C-suite just needs to see outcomes. And so more and more, for example, at WonderBotz, what we've been doing is creating a managed service of this, which is just digital process, digital process outsourcing. And I just call it digital BPO, right? There's the marketing hack coming on. Because that's relatable. You're not outsourcing to an offshore center in Asia Pacific or a nearshore center in Latin America if you're in the United States, nearshore Poland if you're sitting in the UK. You're outsourcing to the cloud, right? And so it's sort of this natural way of explaining that we're still outsourcing. You're still sending your business processes somewhere else. They're just going to a robot and they're going to the cloud and they're having AI help. And it's the modern version of how we're trying to get things done. So definitely business critical. You don't need to know what's behind the curtain though.
Well, it's interesting that, because I love, just to pick up on a couple of things you said, and I shuddered momentarily when you said it's okay to have your own system. I'm looking at something like DRUID here, going all the functionality, all the integrations, all the head starts. And I have actually seen people try to build a conversational platform themselves. And it's, it just, for me, it doesn't work when you want it to get to any sort of scale at all. But it is interesting, your second point as well. And you're saying, I do wonder, like, people pass work over to colleagues in other countries they've never met. As soon as they say it's outsourced to a BPO or to a robot, it suddenly creates a psychological hurdle for them that I've never understood. But I suppose we need to get people comfortable with that, and that's our job as well. So let's talk about a little bit deeper, because I'm hearing words like agentics now, which is the next potential generation of RPA. Are you seeing this? Is Agentics AI the end of RPA, or does it expand what's possible and what is practical for organizations today?
Yeah. So again, category within the umbrella. I think it's the easiest way to kind of translate that. And we formed our partnership with DRUID as a direct result of this conversational enterprise motion, right? So everybody saw ChatGPT and they were entering it in, giving, maid of honor speeches, off the cusp of entering different people in, creating their profiles on LinkedIn, probably plagiarizing some essays in college as well. That the teachers are up in arms, against some of these things. So generative AI took sort of this practical launch that us as practitioners in intelligent automation hadn't been able to do, frankly, right? And so AI was sort of understood by the masses. Now, agentic AI is similar to what I described before in the managed service. And without calling it agentic AI, we've been doing that behind the scenes, right? So it's the machine being able to create the code. It's leveraging some of what you've done in the past and saying, okay, if I've built something for invoice processing and I've connected to my SAP system and perhaps Coupa, right? Then what am I going to use from SAP and Coupa? Agentic AI gives you that head start, right? It says, hey, Paula, when you're thinking about your pipeline going forward, don't forget that you built an object in SAP, and therefore that pipeline that you said over there that was going to eventually hit SAP, maybe you should build that next because you're already 40% of the way there, right? And so what it does is it really just sort of refines the motion. I think Blue Prism originally coined the term, right? The ROM, operating model, robotic operating model. Gartner's come through with several different ways of explaining it. I think we've all been trying to translate what we're talking about with agentic, which is we are having machines and humans work seamlessly together. The other thing that I think is so interesting about agentic is that it finally gives things that we've been working on. So I'm so excited about, the pre-built solutions that we've always had in finance and accounting. It was really hard for folks to understand that, right? Because the automation practitioners would say, okay, but that's a framework, like no big deal, right? And then we'd say, no, but it is a very big deal because you're not building 5 different automations for a report. You're building one automation and then plugging in the logic as needed, right? And agentic is actually that answer. It's sort of, infusing the different snippets of code with the overarching business, process that you're trying to engineer or automate, right? Again, without having the human interceding to say, oh, that should be the next process we build. It's like, nah, based on data, based on what we've already built, the natural sequencing is this, right? And then of course with the advent of generative AI, then you have that little helper to kind of get the code on its way. So I definitely think that's the one that's here to stay. Whether that needs a name, whether it needed its own name, or if it was just kind of like, automation 2.0, I don't know, but I leave that to Gartner, and we talk about it after they come up with their new names, right, Kieran? But I do think it's just a part of the whole. I think it's just another branch within that intelligent automation umbrella.
Yeah, I kind of like that, though. It's always evolving, and that's what makes our space that little bit more exciting. But that idea that there's a conductor helping us and guiding us to create solutions that actually drive business impact and connect together the bits that we've done before is quite exciting. I have to say, I can't imagine being in a different space. So you mentioned a moment ago, DRUID. What are WonderBotz doing with DRUID Agentic AI at this moment in time?
Yeah, so we're drinking the Kool-Aid first. So as head of marketing, what's been awesome is that I've been able to begin helping to lead this charge of us making our website conversational. Because the way I see it is that if our users, if our clients, if our prospects, if our partners can interact directly with the capability and the functionality, it begins to have a little bit more art of the possible, not from a consultant, but from experience, right? And I think that's where the true magic begins, when clients begin to understand, wow, okay, I get it, and I see where I can use it, right? And so we're starting that process. We have a couple of large banks that are actually using DRUID internally, which is very interesting too. I think post-pandemic, there's still a very, very big emphasis and focus from HR departments to make sure that their employees are satisfied, that they feel communicated with, that they understand what's going on. And so having a more seamless approach to policy and procedure being laid out, having, access to when your holidays are, do you celebrate Indigenous people? Does the UK have a bank holiday? What's happening in India right now with Diwali season, right? So how do we, reconcile all these different things that are happening in our global organization, right? So it's been very exciting to see that there's consumption and appetite for spend to make employees happier, right? And then of course we have, the tried and true, sort of areas, what I like to call my airline hotline, right? I am so tired of calling an airline speak to an agent, speak to an agent, speak to an agent, 0, 0, 0, my like fingers turning blue from pressing 0 so many times. And we're finally on the forefront of making that experience better, right? And really helping customer service centers, understand what an agent is and humanizing the agent. The thing is that why I love this space is because what we're doing is taking the stuff that we've turned humans into robots along the way. That's just what happened. Humans became robots in accounting. They became robots in customer service. If you don't get off the phone in 5 minutes, you're going to get your pay docked. I mean, what happened, right? And so now what we're able to do with these awesome technologies is put the human back into the humanity of our jobs and in the workforce. And it's so ironic that we're leveraging robots to do that. So I'm really, really excited about the DRUID partnership. In fact, this week that we're recording this podcast is also when our CEO, Steve Laval's heading down there to talk about agentic as well. With DRUID, there's a big customer, appreciation engagement happening on Thursday. And so we've really locked in to this partnership because I see so much potential with the combination of the workflows that you can do with conversational and the inputs that generative AI is starting to have. Imagine an accountant sitting there, Kieran, and saying, I need this pivot table to show me quarter end results tomorrow, and I want it to do that every month. And then the code is generated and then it happens. And then suddenly everybody's in harmony with technology and people. And I think we're very close to that being a reality.
Yeah, it does go back to that bit, doesn't it? Taking the robot out of the human. And you mentioned banks earlier on. One of DRUID's biggest success stories is obviously Bank of Transylvania. And they've been there for years now, doing amazing things. It's not just, for staff getting those answers, but actually now you can redesign what your HR strategy or HR leadership can do and where they can actually spend their time. And there's, as you say, tons and tons of different examples here that all tend to make sense. And I had one last night. I was on talking to a person and they didn't know the answer in their own organization. I opened up their chatbot and why I didn't do that in the first place. But it was a chatbot plus AI, conversational AI, and there was a bit of generative AI in it. And it was suddenly cognitive AI. And I was able to get all the things that I'd done and instruct the actual person how to do it next time. And they were thanking me as the customer for walking them through their own conversational generative AI platform. So it was kind of funny, but I'm glad we got there in the end. So what does the future look like for automation, Paula?
So I think I've described a little bit of what the future looks like, throughout the course of this conversation. But really what I see is a seamless place where business and technology come together with no friction, and I think at the end of the day, we've always had this kind of like sales and marketing always have their kind of age old rival, right? Like, not enough leads. Oh, you're not closing my good leads, right? And then I think the same is true of business and technology is, it's too expensive. And it's like, okay, but you're not changing the way you do it, right? And so I think we're finally at a point where we're seeing that converge and we're seeing that finance leaders, I'm speaking on Thursday to a group of CFOs. It's AI for the CFO. I've been talking about this for 5 years, and finally they're the ones creating the program called AI for the CFO and inviting me, right? So I think the appetite is there. I think the acceptance that this is reality is there. And so the future of automation is where we truly just kind of begin to weave in the robot workforce, if you will, or the digital workforce or the whatever workforce we're going to call it, where we weave that into our budget cycles as human capital. And where it begins to be something that HR takes ownership of in hiring practices, because it's going to be a little bit of people, a little bit of machine. It's no longer tools. It's an operating model. It's a line of business. It's a fully supported P&L. And so we need to think that way. So I see the future of it sort of taking its real seat at the table as a true line of business. And you see more and more titles that are chief automation officer, right? Chief AI officer. I really think it's going to get kind of its own sweet spot or be a shared service center, right? But either way, there's going to be sort of this global view of how we do automation. The other thing that I hope to happen, I don't know if I can say that this is truly going to happen, but there needs to be some more governance legislation, kind of a global community of understanding what we need to do with AI from a security perspective, but also from an ethics perspective, right? And I think that it's also incumbent on us as practitioners who know this to get involved in that. Which is why it's been a passion of mine to really get involved at the education level of public sector. Because at the very least, if we get in the minds of the young, the youngins that are going into the workforce, maybe we can help influence that. But just to influence the fact that a conversation needs to be had. So I think this is going to be a line of business. I think it's definitely going to continue to rage on in a core curriculum in universities. But I think government needs to catch up globally, not just here in the US.
No, there's a lot to do, isn't there? And I'm glad you pointed to us young'uns here in the middle of this, Paula, as well, because I can't imagine you describing me not as a young one. I'm assuming that's who you were talking about a second ago. No, it's an exciting space. Oh, good. It's, do you know something? It's an exciting space. There's lots of stuff happening. There's lots of stuff still to happen. I do worry because with all this change, I see some people going, well, I'll just hold on. And I worry about digital Darwinism, which is the case of, look, you bury your head in the sand, you wait for the next best thing, life has passed you by. And I think things are moving just that little bit too quickly. You and I have seen it in the last 5 years where folks were talking about doing things very tactically. Now we're talking about doing things very strategically. And I'm in the same lens as you, which is I think that it's too important, this technology and this change in business, just to be thrown across to your IT team and say, go transform the world. I don't think that works anymore. This is where HR, other functions, all of a sudden now they have the tools and the conductors and the agentics and the intelligent automation to make all these things work and do it in a very intelligent, intuitive way. So let's see, the future is exciting now as well. Paula, for those who want to find out a little bit more about you, WonderBotz and WonderBotz relationship with DRUID, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So if you go to wonderbotz.com, and that's WonderBotz with a Z at the end, then you will be able to see the partnership. It's actually going to be on the homepage by the time this podcast launches. So it should be there as we continue to promote this throughout the balance of the year. WonderBotz and DRUID are not only going to be, kind of stoically sitting on a website. We also have several activities coming up. So what I'll do is I'll send along the webinar that we have that we're collaborating with DRUID on as well. So you can put it in the show notes for the folks that are interested in that as well. And then we're going to continue to do collaborations in New York. So we have a critical mass of clients and prospects that are in New York that DRUID also has. And so we're going to continue to kind of pump the demand so that folks begin to understand that. I think today, when people think of conversational AI, it's kind of like when they thought about robots in the past, it was scary. When they think conversational AI, they think of that dreadful story of, like a chat bot answering a phone, And so we need to undo that narrative and say, you're not going to press 0 until your finger falls off, agent. It's like, no, this is different. So I think we have a little bit of education to do, which is why I plan on going on the road, with DRUID in the next couple months to really help folks understand it. But again, I see promise of this being another development engine, right? If the commands and the logic that we put in verbally to the DRUID platform then spits out the actions and beginnings, that's sort of a soft launch to generative AI that I think a lot of our clients, where they're at in their maturity, can kind of handle. They can swallow that. So I'm really excited. There's a lot to come. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes too. I'm always open for a conversation. And for any youngins, and by youngins, I mean anybody that's under me, my age, under 40. Anybody under 40 has a lot to learn, and anybody over 60 that doesn't want to retire and figure it out has a lot to learn. We do a lot of community building at WonderBotz because we truly believe in upskilling at any age, any time, any place. And the tribal knowledge that, folks have in organizations is fundamental to effective automation building. So nobody is exempt from this conversation if they're still in the workforce and if not. So open to it. Thanks for asking, Kieran.
No, my pleasure. And I adore all that. And that's the thing, conversational AI, with generative AI infused in agentics, is one of those things that will lead to digital fluency in your business pretty quick. Look, Paula, thank you so much indeed for taking time to come on DRUID Talks. Thank you everyone who's listening into the series. Please do follow Paula. Please do look at what WonderBotz are doing. Z for you, those in the US, S for those of you in the rest of Europe. But I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day and every success in your partnership. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kieran. Thanks all.